Hi, kids. It's Carole Marsh. This is World Read Aloud Day. And in just a few minutes, I'm going to read aloud to you. I'm going to read a short story called The Secret Christmas Potpourri and Tussie Mussie story. Now, I know it's probably not Christmas when you're listening to this, but you know what I like to do? I like to read Christmas stories all year long. And this is not your traditional Christmas story. There's no Santa, there's no big tree, there's not all those things. So just wait and see. But first, I want to tell you what potpourri is and what a Tussie Mussie is. These items were very popular back in the Victorian era, usually in cities where there were people who had a lot of money and they put up big trees for Christmas and put real live burning candles on them and had all kinds of fancy decorations, including a Tussie Mussie. So a Tussie Mussie is something that and after you watch this, I think you can go online and see how to make one. You can fold out of white paper, or this is some fancy paper with writing on it, into sort of an ice cream cone shape. And then you put all kinds of things in, and it can be little toys, candy. It's sort of like the thing that came before a stocking that you would hang on the mantle. And you can add lace or ribbon on the outside. You could put a tag and say, to mom, and you would put this Tussie Mussie on your tree. They were very pretty. If you've got any party hats, those little pointy party hats, and turn them upside down, they make really good Tussie Mussie. You also could put potpourri in Tussie Mussies. And potpourri is something that you can also make today. And I'll tell you how to make it today because I know what you might have in your backyard. You can get a baggie and you can go out and collect acorns or other kind of nuts that are on the ground, little snippets of pine or fir or anything that smells good. Things like berries. I've got a little bit of holly berry here this morning that I just picked that smells good. And then you can get it all in little small pieces and get some oil, peppermint oil, lavender oil. Ask your mom about that and put a few drops in it and shake it up real good. And then all of that will begin to smell good. And you can also add little pieces of ribbon or lace or buttons or anything else that you want. And when you're all done and you shake it all up, you can pour it in a pretty bowl like the Victorians would have, and it will make your house smell really good. And that's a good thing. And they used to do it because their houses didn't smell very good, and they would do it to make the house smell good. Sometimes they just put it all over their floor, maybe in their hair, but don't eat it. Don't leave it where little kids can get it. But that's what a Tussie Mussie is, and the potpourri is. And you can also put potpourri in the Tussie Mussie. I want to tell you a little bit more about the Victorian era. They did things like have fancy cakes, little sweet, wonderful confections on fancy cake plates. They, their dresses and outfits were elaborate and silk and flowers and pretty and long gowns. They liked to play cards. And so they had very pretty cards that had pretty ladies on it. And so everything was nice and pretty. They even dressed up their dogs. Now, here is a dog dressed up sort of Victorian style. This is my dog. You can hear her growling in the background. You might hear her barking now and then. I can't do a thing about it. So it was a different era. Oh, I'll show you one more thing. And they often, where you write with pencils, they would write with elaborate feather quill pens on really pretty paper and send letters. Because after all, they didn't have email or text or anything like that. But the story I'm going to tell you takes place during the Civil War. And the Civil War, as you know, was a terrible war, the war between the states. And this story takes place near the very end of the Civil War, when the soldiers were straggling home. They were all worn out. They were tired. They were bloody. They were wounded. It might be a long way to get home. Maybe they could take a train, but a lot of them just had to walk. This story takes place in Appalachia. It was in the mountains of Tennessee, a very poor place. And the family lived there. and the father had been at war for a very long time. You can probably guess it was not going to be a happy Christmas. Let's get started. The night before Christmas. It was deep in the woods of the Appalachian Mountains, a place so scrunched down in a holler that by the time snow reached the roof of the sad little cabin, it looked like fairy dust. It was a place where Christmas had never come before. On the day, December 25th, had come and gone many times. But Christmas, a real Christmas, with a tree and stockings, had never come to the sad little cabin of the Knuckle family. It wasn't likely to come this year either. Father Knuckle was away fighting the war between the states. The family could still remember the day he left, whistling gaily to make them all think that he wasn't afraid and that there was nothing to worry about. Grandfather Knuckle had died on Thanksgiving Day. Grandmother Knuckle was trying to take care of Mother Knuckle, who was in bed sick and had been for weeks and weeks. The Knuckle kids, who everyone called the Knuckleheads, wanted so badly to have Christmas, not for themselves, but for their mother. The Knuckleheads went to their grandmother. "We want to put stockings up on the chimney," they said, "just in case Santa stops this year." Grandmother Knuckle just laughed. It was not a happy laugh. "Look at your socks, you silly knuckleheads. The toes have giant holes in them. Even if Santa did put something in them, that would fall right out. So don't get your hopes up." The idea. But the knucklehead kids were very stubborn. "We could sew up holes in our socks," suggested Susie Knucklehead. "We are all out of thread and yarn," Roger Knucklehead reminded her. "I have this," said Bebo, the youngest knucklehead. He skittered beneath his cot and brought out a few sheets of paper in colors the color of candy. There were also bits of ribbon and lace. "Well, what good is that?" said Roger. "No good at all. Don't be such a knucklehead." Bebo began to cry. "Don't cry, Bebo," said Susie. "Please don't cry. It's good stuff, and we can do something with it. I just know." "What?" demanded her older brother. "We can make Tussie Mussies," Susie said. "I saw them in a book once. Rich kids in big fancy Victorian houses hang them on their Christmas tree. We can make some and hang them up for stockings." "How are you going to make stockings out of paper?" asked her brother. His sister took the paper from her younger brother. With a stub of pencil, she drew a pattern with 2 straight lines that came to a point and 1 curved side. Then she took some scissors and, following the pattern, cut out 3 of the shapes from the pretty pastel paper. "That does not look like a stocking," said Roger Knucklehead. Susie Knucklehead smiled at Bebo. "Watch," she said. Then she took one of the sheets and folded into something that looked like an ice cream cone. She glued one of the straight edges over the other. "It isn't like a stocking," she said, "but it will hold stuff just fine." "At least it doesn't have a big hole in the bottom like my sock," said Bebo, wriggling his pink toes. The knuckleheads laughed. Soon they made 3 Tussie Mussies. They crisscrossed ribbon around the cones and added lace collars around the top. "These are so beautiful. I don't see how Santa could ignore them," said Susie Knucklehead, very hopefully. They hung the Tussie Mussies by the chimney and went to bed beneath a thick quilt in the loft, dreaming of Christmas. Dreaming dreams. Christmas night, the knuckleheads slept fitfully. They could hear their mother moaning in bed. They could hear the rustle of grandmother's slippers back and forth across the floor. Roger Knucklehead dreamed that he heard whistling on the cold north wind. Susie Knucklehead dreamed that the fine snow on the roof was sugar on cookies. And Bebo Knucklehead dreamed that a parade of animals had come into the cabin and danced in front of the fire. The next morning, Christmas morning, the knuckleheads woke up early. It was so cold that there was frost on the inside of the cabin walls. The tiny window panes were caked with snow. "Let's go downstairs and see what Santa left," squealed Bebo, but quietly beneath his breath so as not to disturb Mother and Grandmother. "Don't get your hopes up," warned Roger Knucklehead. "It's cold and dark down there," said Susie Knucklehead with a shiver. "I think the fire has gone out, but we might as well go look." The Knuckleheads tiptoed down the steps from the loft to the cold, dark room. There, in the last gleam of moonlight, they could see their Tussie Mussies swinging in the draft from the door. But it was too dark to see if there was anything in the cones. Roger Knucklehead reached his hand up and felt the top of one of the cones. "I feel stuff," he said. Susie Knucklehead stood on tiptoe and put her hand up. "I feel stuff too." She held Bebo up. "I feel stuff, but I don't know what it is." "What is it?" Carefully, Roger Knucklehead removed each Tussie Mussie from a peg. He handed one to his brother and one to his sister, then kept one for himself. By this time, just a little sunlight was starting to come in through the window. Each of the Knuckleheads poured the contents of their paper out onto the fireplace hearth to see what they had. Each one sighed. Bebo began to cry. "What is this stuff?" he answered in disappointment. Before each Knucklehead lay a small pile of nuts, pine needles, pine cones, dead flower petals, holly berries, tree bark, and other assorted stuff. "It smells good," said Roger Knucklehead, "but what good is it? It will not make a good gift for our mother." Just then the Knuckleheads heard crying in the other room. "Oh dear," said Susie Knucklehead. "Our poor mother, what is wrong?" Suddenly Grandmother burst from the room. "Clean out that mess," she ordered, "and get in here." Quickly, the Knuckleheads shuffled the stuff back into the Tussie Mussie cones. They carried them into their mother's room, one after the other, afraid of what they would see. It was barely light in the room, but a small candle twinkled by the bed. "What's wrong, Mother?" asked Susie Knucklehead. "Why, nothing, darling," said Mother. "I just wanted to wish each of my wonderful children Merry Christmas. What do you have in your hands?" For a moment, the Knucklehead kids did not know what to do. Then Susie came forward. "It's for you, Mother," she said. "It's a Christmas present." She shrugged her shoulders apologetically. It's just some stuff." Her older brother came forward. "I have some stuff for you too," he said. Bebo held up his cone. "Here's my stuff, Mother. Merry Christmas." Mother took the 3 cones. At first, she looked at them quizzically. Then she took a sniff of each one. She smiled. "Why, this is not stuff. This is potpourri. The ladies in the fine houses have this to keep their homes smelling sweet. I carried potpourri in my pocket on my wedding day." "Potpourri?" said Bebo. "No," said Mother. "You say it potpourri. It's a French word." My, said Grandmother. "A French word in our cabin on Christmas. Wonders never cease." "I have a present for you 3 also," said Mother. The Knuckleheads looked at each other in surprise. This could not be true. With a smile, Mother pulled back her quilt. There lay a tiny baby girl, pinker even than Bebo's toes. "Your new sister," said Mother. Just as the Knuckleheads reached forward to give their new baby sister a kiss, they heard a whistle. They spun around, and there in the doorway stood their father. Look, squealed the Knuckleheads. "Look at the new baby." Father came into the room. He smiled at Mother. "She's beautiful," he said. "What is her name?" Everyone turned to look at Mother. Mother took a sniff of the Tussie Mussie. "Why, I believe we'll call her Potpourri, she said. Potpourri, said Father. He gave a whistle and grabbed Roger, Susie, and Bebo in a giant hug and began to scrub the top of their heads with his knuckles, just the way he always had. Just what he needed, he said with a great laugh. Another knucklehead. Christmas Day. As Mother fed the baby, Father made a great fire and Grandmother began to cook a rabbit stew for Christmas dinner. The knuckleheads whispered in the corner. I wonder how that stuff, that potpourri, that potpourri, got in those Tussie Mussies, asked Roger. Me too, said Susie. I was so surprised. But I thought that's why we hung them up, said Bebo, so Santa could fill them. Father overheard them and turned from the fire. Bebo's right. Never question the magic of Christmas, no matter how long it takes to come, or what surprises it brings. You have to keep your hopes up. Anyone who doesn't is a knucklehead. All the knuckleheads had to laugh, especially since when Father leaned over to pick up another log, a pile of nuts, pine needles, pine cones, rose petals, and holly berries fell right out of his pocket onto the floor. Well, there's Coconut right on time saying, read me another story. But that's the story for today. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned more about the Victorian era, the Civil War, potpourri, Tussie Mussies. Try making your own. And I'll read to you again another day. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.